Ready to eat my twin. Oh!
That's fantastic. That got on there.
So, are we started?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Awesome.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Superversive Livestream. I am your host, Anthony Marquetta, and here with our special guest star, Ken Dickinson.
Good
Benjamin
evening.
Wheeler is not here today because he got a boo-boo.
I
Be careful
did.
when you're working out, kids.
I was lifting both their mothers.
Which was
So, as
challenging
you
to
can,
do. Because they're
so
in two
as
different parts of the country.
yeah, right. As you can see, I lied slightly. Ben's here, but he doesn't really want to participate today. So it's up to me and Ken to carry the show.
Our condolences, guys.
As you can probably tell by my laughter, I am very amused by the idea for today's stream. We got 3 likes already. Holy crap. Everybody's just so excited to see a stream starring me as our view count drops to 0.
It's because they know. They know.
With perfect timing. The view count drops to 0. So, our topic today is things that I normally wouldn't talk about if Ben were here. So, Ken, what do you
Yes.
think of Ben as an editor?
You know, he's got
Pieces
a lot
of
of
crap.
problems. He whines a lot.
Bradford Walker says, I'm just here for hijinks and laughs. You're in the right place.
That's right. That's all we can do.
That's basically it.
Pretty much. Although, of course, we jest, but Ben is probably the best editor I've ever had. Leave aside the fact that he's the only editor I've ever had.
Ooh, and it's still only probably.
I mean, had to be honest.
Ben's the only editor I ever had. He's probably the best one.
It's either the best or the worst simultaneously. Because that's how things work. Anthony, how
So,
was your Sunday?
how was my Sunday?
Yes.
Good question. It was
Thank you.
fine. I had a fun day.
Fantastic.
Well, no, fun's the wrong word, but I had a day and nothing catastrophically terrible happened. So,
There you go.
that's a win.
How was church? Is your church even open? I guess is another question.
It is. Church was,
Fantastic.
tried to go to a Latin mass. Didn't
Ooh.
work out the way
Ah.
I wanted it to. Because I got the time wrong.
Now, when you go to a Latin mass, because I assume you've done one before, do you
Of
actually
course I
understand what
have.
they're saying by context, or do you actually understand what they're saying because you understand Latin?
I do not speak Latin, no.
Ah, pity.
No, 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 no. You gotta use context and you gotta use the little books that they distribute.
Gotcha.
It was interesting. So I did go to one.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I wanted to go. I'm going to translate some Catholic speak into English for you
I
and for
appreciate
any
this.
viewers who aren't Catholic.
Yes, to our
So,
viewing public, I am a Protestant, and I've spent most of my life making fun of Catholics, so this will be educational for me.
yeah. So there are actually several different types of Catholic Mass.
Hmm.
And you could, even in the Western Catholic Church, you could subdivide it. And this is a very, very rough divide. And you could
Hmm.
actually even divide it further than this. But most basically into 2 types, the Latin Mass and what's called the Novus Ordo.
Okay.
And you could subdivide the Latin Mass into the High Mass and the Low Mass,
Okay.
which is also called the extraordinary form and the ordinary form. Uh, blah, blah, blah. Long story short is the Low Latin Mass means no singing. The
Okay.
High Latin Mass means that there is Gregorian chant in the background.
Ooh.
Yeah, Megabuster Shepherd says you sing in Latin but have the English printed below it. Right, so I have been to Latin Mass twice. There was today, and once was at the Blue Army Shrine on a Thursday. Uh, at the Blue Army, so the Blue Army Shrine is like a shrine to Our Lady of Fatima that's about 20 minutes from my house. Beautiful place, I really enjoy going there. Anyway, I learned randomly, we went because it was a holy day of obligation. which
Okay.
again, to translate Catholicese into English, it meant that we were required to go to mass that day, even though it wasn't a Sunday.
Okay.
So it happened to be Thursday, and I learned that day that on Thursdays, Our Lady of Fatima does a low Latin mass. So that was my introduction to the Latin mass. But I was a little disappointed because there was no Gregorian chant, and isn't that why you really want to go?
I
So
mean, it's the only
I
reason I would go.
I made a point of trying to get there, and then I learned that I got the time wrong. They had multiple masses today, and I went to the low Latin mass. They were having a high Latin mass, but it was later.
Gotcha.
So I don't know. Maybe I'll go next week. And this, by the way, is a gross oversimplification of the various types of masses as well, because there's
Mm,
also the Byzantine Catholic Church, which is also Catholic, and they have their divine liturgy, which is what they call what we would consider a mass.
hmm
And the divine liturgy is entirely sung and can be in a variety of languages.
You know, I
I
went
have
to a
been
Russian Orthodox one, or a Russian. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah, that's the
Orthodox.
liturgy that they use essentially. Although
Okay.
it could be in English,
hmm
uh, it
Oh
doesn't
no,
have to
it
be.
was all in Russian. Nobody understood it.
Yeah, so you went to one that was done in Russian. I've
Yes.
There's a church near me that maybe I'll go to one day as I go on my journey through the liturgical
hmm
life of the church. They have one that's in Aramaic,
Ooh.
of all things, within about 20 minutes or so of my house, which, as far as I'm concerned, isn't far.
Sure.
I have a different conception of far than some people because I have commuted much further than that
Sure.
without breaking a sweat. So 20 minutes to me is a jaunt. But some people
20
consider,
minutes. Guys, I live in Los Angeles. 20-minute commute to me is nothing.
yeah, it depends on it depends on who you ask. I've noticed what's considered a long commute or not.
Right.
So, like with me, I work a half hour from where I live. I work a half hour away from my house, and
hmm
where I work, like I was asked during the interview for it. It's a half hour away from you. Are you sure that you want to do it? And I like looked at the principal or at the person interviewing me, and I said, "That's why I applied." I'm like, I've worked a full hour away and further, and I would have gone further if I had to. That This is a half hour away, as far as I'm concerned. This is like miraculous. So, I went to college 45 minutes away, commuted there and back easily.
Now that would be tricky because college. I mean, you might have class one in the morning, two in the afternoon, or something like that.
I just stay there all day too.
Oof. Ugh. Well, I guess that works. You just pass out in the library after a little while.
Pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. Be lying if I didn't say that's
But
what I did in college.
um, yeah, not to go into my personal life too much, since that has historically been a verboten topic on the show and will remain so. But going into my driving habits. So the idea of a church that's 20 minutes away from me is nothing to me. I mean, the church I went to today was about a 45-minute, and it was it was a special thing. Like, I wanted to visit it, but even that, I didn't really consider it that big of a deal. Yeah,
Sure.
like, it's not that far.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Not. No.
the Blue Army Shrine being 20 minutes away from me is actually great. I love the Blue Army Shrine. Absolutely beautiful chapel, and they have like an outdoor church that they open up in the summers where like it's literally open air.
Ooh,
You know,
I love
really
outdoor church
really nice.
services.
Yeah, you wouldn't think, you don't see that very often with Catholics, but it's nice to see it. And
Sure.
I understand why, by the way. I don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there should be more of them. There probably
Mhm.
shouldn't be, if anything. But that they
Sure.
exist is nice.
Sure. Yeah, having too many of those
Uh
would be too hard to do with the kneeling and standing and
yeah, there's
the
that.
Catholic
There's
calisthenics you
the
got to do.
fact that right, there's the fact that you got to care about weather or whatever. So they have a chapel
hmm
uh that's kind of they have kind of an underground chapel. Like, you walk in, it's a little bit below the ground.
hmm
And they have like a big amphitheater area outside of it. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I've taken photos of it and whatever. It's like a pilgrimage spot. I
Oh,
saw I went to a mass that was presided over by for a cardinal named Cardinal Burke. So
okay.
Cardinal Burke is who I will describe as one of the good ones.
That sounds like more
He's
something I would say.
yeah, well, Cardinal Burke is one of the good ones. You know, he's like an arch conservative cardinal. You know, he gave a mass to Our Lady of Fatima. It was a
Hmm.
pretty as it was, and I actually went to the mass, and it was like super packed,
Oh
like
wow.
super packed. I was actually a little surprised. I figured it would be crowded, but I didn't think he was that famous. But I underestimated it.
Now,
Uh,
what is
and
packed
it was a
in
rainy
your
day
area?
too. Oh, let me put it to you this way: it's a massive outdoor uh, amphitheater area.
Hmm. Right.
All of the seats in there were filled,
Hmm.
plus several rows behind that
Okay.
in the rain. Like
Ooh.
I think two parking lot, and it was raining out too.
Right.
So, and there were like two full parking lots
Hmm.
that were completely full. So yeah, I don't know about the numbers.
Gotcha.
I yeah, I'm trying to think even of an estimate.
Hmm.
Like I don't know. Maybe, and I could be way off, like 1,000 people or something. But
Okay.
that honestly though, like I could be not even close. Somebody could go, "What are you talking about? It doesn't fit more than 200," and I would go, "Oh." I'd be like, "Well, then never mind." That's my guess though. So
Sure.
Megabuster Shepherd says, "Okay, question for the chat: Will America become majority Catholic in a few decades due to the unmitigated immigration?" No,
No.
definitely not.
Nope.
Uh, however, China will,
Really? Why do you think that?
because China is currently the fastest growing Christian country in the world.
Sure, but why will it become predominantly Catholic?
Because Catholic is the church that's growing more than the others.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm not predicting it for any cultural reasons or whatever. Just as far as I understand the demographics, it
Hmm.
happens to be the Catholic Church.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Ben says over my dead body.
Ben, you are a true Protestant. See, I go to the chat. I go to John MacArthur's church here in Los Angeles.
Oh,
So
I actually have heard of John MacArthur,
I assumed you probably
which
had.
should tell you. Yeah, which should tell you something,
Oh
since I
yeah.
am very much not Protestant,
Oh yeah.
that
He
I've
hates
heard
you
of him.
guys.
That's funny.
It's like all good Calvinists, he absolutely hates Catholics.
Yeah, well, that's true. Corey doesn't hate me, or does he?
Oh, ooh, I don't know. Is Corey even listening in?
I doubt it, but
Pity. And it's because he hates you. There, see, it all comes full circle.
secretly, Corey has hated us the whole time. So, for people listening who don't know and are interested, we are referring to Corey McCleary, who is an author. Uh, Corey is actually decently prolific at this point. I mean, not he's not pulp sweet or anything, but he's finished a novel and he's gotten several short stories published.
Oh, he finally got his
So
novel finished. Hey, good for you, Corey. If you ever listen to this,
one of them is he has. The thing about Corey is that yes,
never
that's
mind
not
then.
true. Nope, not true. It's published on Wattpad.
Wattpad
Ben is
Publishings?
incorrect. Wattpad is a self-publishing website. You
Huh.
put stuff online, and you put stuff online. You could read it. So
See,
yes, he has a full novel up on Wattpad.
see, I had thought Wattpad was essentially one of those fan fiction sites like Archive of Our Own and stuff like that.
No, it's not fan fiction. It's just crappy teenage fiction. But I mean, there's no law that says it has to be crappy.
Sure, sure.
It just normally is. And Corey has the full thing on Wattpad.
Well, still, semi-published is semi-published. Good for you, Corey.
Exactly. Megabuster Shepherd says, "I hope for the conversion of North Korea soon as well." I do too, but I haven't heard anything about it. Like I haven't heard anything about them converting. On the flip side, though, so as far as like how the church converts versus like how Islam converts, I was discussing this with my family.
Hmm.
Islam right now is technically the fastest growing religion in the world, and
Sure.
in a way it makes sense because Christianity grows based from the blood of the, like, the what's the famous saying? Paraphrase. It's something like blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church.
Right.
So Christianity grows when you start killing Christians.
Right.
People see the Christians willing to die for their faith, become inspired, and convert.
Right.
Islam grows by the sword.
Right.
And
For them, it grows by reverse.
right. Islam grows by conquering somewhere, then saying either you convert or you die.
Right.
Now, the Christians have pulled this trick too, but when the Christians have pulled this trick, they have always pulled this trick when they always do this when the Christians are being persecuted, and that's the only way to stop it.
Right.
For example, Charlemagne did this in the Saxon Wars.
Right.
But the difference between what Charlemagne did and what Islam and what the Muslims did when they started growing their religion, and also nowadays, by the way,
Right.
very much nowadays, the
Yeah,
difference
it
between
hasn't
what
changed.
no, the difference between what Charlemagne did and what the Muslims do is that Charlemagne had that whole forced conversion aspect because the Christians were being persecuted by Vikings in the north.
Right.
So it was his way of quelling the Viking rebellions, the Saxon rebellions in the north.
Right.
And even then, honestly, it's unclear if it even was as successful as it should have been. Don't get me wrong. I think that the war was itself a just war in that he had every right to conduct it. But at the same time, that's not to say it necessarily was the best way to go about it.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know if it was or not. I'm not even really making a judgment. I've just heard alternate things about it. Bradford Walker says the Crusades were justified.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah.
At
You
the
would never
very
hear us
least,
arguing otherwise.
no. At the very least, the first or second Crusades. So, as far as how Christianity is growing, it's growing in China because Christians are being persecuted in China.
Right.
Now, Muslims are also being persecuted in China, of course, the Uyghur Muslims. The difference between the Christian and the Muslim persecutions is that when Muslims are persecuted, they don't grow.
Right.
When Christians are persecuted, they do grow.
Right.
The only
I don't know if
people.
you heard this. Did you hear about the Protestant pastor in Canada who got arrested because he was preaching the gospel during COVID
No,
times?
but it certainly sounds plausible.
Yeah.
It's Canada.
Yeah, he's in maximum security because he broke curfew to have his church in person.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting you. It's just an interesting story.
No, that's makes perfect. That's interesting. So, as far as what's going on, like in China, as far as I know, the only place that ever kind of figured out the way to stopping conversions is Japan, because Japan figured out the secret that Christians managed to convert by using their martyrs to inspire people.
Right.
So what they would do is move the martyrdoms to places that weren't open to the public, and then they would force people to recant their Christianity in order to stop the martyrdoms from happening, which is actually an ingenious idea. So you cut people off from seeing it, and you get the most public figures in the movement to recant in front of the people who are being killed. So you cut it off at the legs.
Yeah.
I know that something similar to this, not exactly the same, but similar, happened in the Cristero Wars.
The which ones?
So the Cristero Wars are the wars that took place in Mexico. I'm trying to remember if this is the exact same situation because there were multiple with this, but something happened in Mexico basically where an extremely anti-religious government took over, and they made Catholicism specifically, I think Catholicism illegal, and there was a group that was fighting to hold the gospel, holding mass in secret, the Cristeros, where their battle cry was "Viva Cristo Rey," which is extremely badass. The thing is, though, like they've made inspiring movies about them and whatever, but the thing is that the Cristeros kind of lost. Like they didn't lose as badly as Japan, which basically never got a Christian presence.
Right.
I mean, they did, but never as large as you would expect considering Christianity's track record.
Sure.
But in Mexico, like they actually kind of stamped out the Cristero rebellions, and eventually the government was replaced, but it did severely curtail Christianity and Catholicism in that region. I think it was in Tabasco, like that the Mexican state of Tabasco, that the persecutions got particularly bad. Like it was technically a law all over, but it was really only enforced in Tabasco.
Mhm.
There are several extremely moving and inspiring martyrs that came out of the Cristero Wars. One of them, I want to say Blessed Miguel Pro. Uh, he died. He was a young man, and I might be thinking of the wrong person because again there are multiple. But the young man I'm thinking of, he died, and his last words were "Viva Cristo Rey," and he held out his arms in the crucifixion pose, and they shot
Mhm.
him. And this ended up in the papers and ended up galvanizing all of the pro-Catholics, and they rallied around the cause. No, this isn't the same person. Blessed Miguel Pro was a martyr, I believe, of the Cristero Wars, but uh, he was a different martyr. The person I'm thinking of, and I'll have to see if I can remember his name. Uh, there's a very, very of all people to his girlfriend,
Mhm.
believe it or not, the day before he was executed.
Right.
And the letter is just one of the most heartbreaking things you'll read. It's also one of like the bravest things you'll read. One of those things you read it and you become kind of ashamed of yourself because you realize that you're not this faithful. Yeah. He reads it and he says something along the lines of like, I know that I'm going to die. I know that I'm going to die soon, but I'm not afraid because I am going to see because I know that I'll see you again in heaven. So I want you to give my love to my parents and also to live a good life, because if you live a holy life, then then we will meet again in heaven, and this won't be the end.
Ah, that's really sweet, actually.
They wrote yeah, somebody wrote a poem based on the letter. I
Mhm.
want to find it. Cristero War. I don't know what I should even look up. Girlfriend. But by the way, Blessed Miguel Pro was a martyr of the Cristero War, but he was a Catholic priest who would hold masses in secret, basically.
Gotcha.
Uh, and his last words were "Viva Cristo Rey" when he was shot, but I believe that was common with them, so it's not.
Now, because I don't speak Spanish or Latin, to me, Rey is just the name of a crappy Star Wars character. What is
Long
Rey
live
translated?
Christ the King.
Ah, gotcha.
Viva,
Okay.
Viva
Yes.
Cristo Rey is "Long live Christ the King."
Okay. Very nice.
Which glorious, glorious battle cry.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't even know what to
absolutely.
look up. Cristero War Girlfriend Martyr. That seems
I have no idea.
that seems very wrong. That seems like I
While you
won't.
look that up,
I
I'll
won't.
mention. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Here's no. Keep going. I'm just looking. Saints of the Cristero War. There you go. That might help.
That should do it.
Some of the other. There's a list.
On the note of Japanese persecutions, recently I got into K dramas a little bit because every once in a while I like to watch something that rots my mind as well as my heart. Um, and so I started watching Korean stuff on Netflix. And after a whole bunch of searching, I found out that the reason why Christianity really took off in Korea but not in Japan is because at first, yeah, they persecuted Christians just as much as the Japanese did. But during World War II, it was considered rebellion against the Japanese invaders to become Christian. So that's partly why Christianity took off in the Koreas.
That's interesting.
Yeah, never would have guessed. Makes total sense though.
Let me look up girlfriend saint. Does not work.
Huh. I wonder why.
I'm looking up. There's a blog that I read that I know he wrote about this, so I'm thinking maybe if I type in search
Right.
terms that sort of match.
You'd think that would work, but sometimes Google isn't quite as smart as you wish it was.
Aha, there we go. Blessed Bartolome Blanco Marquez. Oh, this is not so. This is my own fault. Different
How
war.
so? Oh, that'd do it.
It was they spoke Spanish, but two completely different countries, which is hilarious.
What are the countries?
Spain, Spanish Civil, the Red Terror in the Spanish Civil War.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, he wrote Blessed Bartolome Blanco Marquez. He wrote this to his girlfriend from prison the day before he was executed, and he wrote, "My dearest Maruja, your memory will remain me to the grave, and as long as the slightest throb stirs my heart, it will beat for love of you. God has deemed fit to sublimate these worldly affections, ennobling them when we love each other in Him. Though in my final days, God is my light and what I long for, this does not mean that the recollection of the one dearest to me will not accompany me until the hour of my death. So,
Imagine using sublimate in a romance letter. I mean, admittedly, it was translated, but still.
still though, imagine doing that and also just being that badass about it too.
Oh, I would totally do that. That wouldn't surprise me.
So
But
he says
using
goodbye
sublimate, that's
until my body will be buried in the grave in the. I'm skipping ahead so that I don't read the whole freaking thing.
sure,
But
sure, sure.
in the cemetery of Jane, while I am left with only a few hours before that definitive repose. What a poet this guy is.
Yeah, right.
Allow me to ask but one thing of you, that in memory of the love we shared, which at this moment is enhanced, that you take on as your primary objective the salvation of your soul. In that way, we will procure our reuniting in heaven for all eternity, where nothing will separate us. Goodbye until that moment, then, dearest Maruha. Do not forget that I am looking at you from heaven, and try to be a model Christian woman, since in the end, worldly goods and delights are of no avail if we do not manage to save our souls. Wow, what what a guy,
And ladies, if that doesn't get you steamy, nothing will.
right? Got me a little steamy. They also have somebody turned it into a poem, which is actually a very good poem.
Hmm.
The last letter of Bartolome Blanco Marquez. Tomorrow I die in a line of, and this is by the way just the letter in poem form. Tomorrow I die, and a line of grim men will shoot bullets in me till I fall. But my life has been good, and I thank you for that, and I thank my Lord God above all. I will remember your face to the dark, silent grave, and love you with all of my heart. Lovers who love in the glory of God become of each other apart. Fear not, Maruha, my darling, my love. I see death, but I am not afraid. Remember, Maruha, my dear and my dove, recall me in life's errant way. Take thought to your soul, my lady, and love that in heaven we meet again, and love in the way God meant us to love, forever, in life without end.
I'm sorry, but the line "men will riddle my body with bullets until I fall" is just hysterical.
A line of grim men will shoot bullets in me till
Yeah,
I fall.
yeah, whatever. Still funny.
I think it's a good line.
Oh, it's a
I
great line,
disagree.
but it's a funny
I
line.
like it.
I can like something
A
and still
little
think it's hysterical.
in a dark humor way, I guess.
Sure.
I find the story. I do find the story very moving. It's one of these things when I read his letter,
Mhm.
and the poem is quite good too. But when I read his letter, it always makes me a little bit more ashamed of myself.
Hmm.
Uh, when you read it and then you go, "Yeah, no, I'm not. He's a better person than I am."
See,
Here,
I know you say that, but I still believe that whole you can never know what you're going to be until you actually find yourself in that situation.
you're absolutely correct. Uh, it reminds me actually of my favorite line in all of fiction.
Mm.
Comes from C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle,
Okay, that's one of my favorite books of all time.
which
Right?
amazing book. I did a report on it for a college class
Oh boy,
because
I must
it's
have hated
such a deep. It's I got a good grade.
it. Nice.
It's such a deep book too.
Hmm.
Like I honestly consider The Last Battle maybe C.S. Lewis's greatest achievement, just for the fact that he had to distill complex eschatological end time theology
Right.
into a children's book
Yeah.
and make it comprehensible,
Right.
and he did it.
Absolutely.
So there's this line in the book. They're at that final battle,
Hmm.
and the horses ride out, and it looks like they're going to be saved. The horses have come to fight for the Narnians,
Right. Oh
and
yeah.
then the dwarves come out and shoot them down,
Right.
and they just show like Tyrion is staring in horror, and
Right.
Jill is in tears, and
Right.
Eustace starts swearing at them.
Yep.
And my favorite line comes after this. Tyrion stands up straight and he says to Eustace, "Eustace, do not swear. A warrior does not swear, but they something along the lines of like they speak with their sword or whatever."
Right.
Yeah. And then he looks at Jill, and this was the line. He says, "If you must weep, sweetheart, turn your face aside and see your tears wet not your bowstring."
Right.
And that
Yeah.
line always, every time I read it, just blows me away.
That's a good line.
Just chills when I read that line. If you
Yeah.
must weep, turn your face aside and see your tears wet not your bowstring. What a great book. I love The Last Battle.
Oh yeah. When I was 8 years old is when I read it, and my grandfather was just about to die when I finished the final. Spoiler warning. When all the kids die, and you realize,
Hmm.
oh wow, this has been essentially a incredibly depressing story this entire time. If you're looking at it with the wrong perspective, it really helped me get through my grandfather actually dying of cancer.
So I never fully appreciated it till years later.
Mm,
Like I read it at the time, I found it very weird and very dark, which it is, by the way.
sure,
Uh,
absolutely,
it there is a feeling of melancholy to the last battle that's really not present in the other Narnia books.
absolutely, because it's the end,
Right, it's really the end. And Tyrion, though, is my favorite Narnian king.
as he should be,
Uh,
because he really has the most depth of any of them.
right, Tyrion is a very flawed person, but
Right,
when push comes to shove and everything is on the line, Tyrion proves himself a true king of Narnia. It's the idea.
absolutely.
But anyway, so in I read it again. I would read Narnia series because C.S. Lewis I would consider probably my favorite author.
Sure.
Uh, and I reread The Last Battle and the whole Narnia series over and over again
Right.
throughout the years. I couldn't even tell you how many times.
Hmm.
At least three,
Right.
probably more than that. And The Last Battle is a book that grew in my estimation every time. It also helped
Hmm.
when I started reading like Philip Pullman and people's dumb objections, quote unquote, to The Last Battle, and I realized that they were terrible and stupid.
Right.
Yeah. And then it helped me to respect C.S. Lewis more. Uh,
Absolutely.
The Last Battle isn't necessarily my favorite C.S. Lewis book to read.
Okay.
It might be my favorite, his greatest achievement because of how, you know, the enormity of what he accomplished in the book, creating a complex theological story for children. But
Right.
I actually think my favorite book by him is probably The Great Divorce. Uh,
Yes, that's a great book.
the Great Divorce is the only book I've ever read that made me understand, like, it helped me to understand what it means to go to hell and how
Right.
regular people can go to hell. Because that was
Right. Not just
always
your
a
mass murders and whatever.
right. It was always a stumbling block with me. And as Lewis himself would point out, as it should be when you think
Hmm.
about it,
Sure.
it's not something you should be comfortable with. It's something that should bother you that
Right.
regular people can go to hell. But
Right.
it was something that I never really understood until I
Hmm.
read The Great Divorce.
Right.
And The Great Divorce is a scary, scary book
Oh, it is.
when you think about it.
It's scary, but at
It's
the same time, it's
also
incredibly redeeming.
it's scary. It's also hilarious. So I actually went to see a one man show version of the play,
Ooh.
or the book. I mean, somebody did it as a one man show.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was the youngest person there by probably a good 20 years. Uh, I was also there on my own because
Right.
I'm the type of person who would go to see a one man C.S. Lewis show alone with nobody else. And it was amazing. And one thing that watching the one man show version of it
Hmm.
made me realize
Hmm.
is that the book is actually hilarious.
Yeah. Well, C.S. Lewis
And
is
like
hilarious himself.
he is. You don't realize, like, it's not as obviously funny, I don't think, as the Screw Tape Letters,
Sure.
but that whole monologue that he has at the beginning of the story, or the whole, I guess the whole thing's a monologue, but the whole dialogue he has with the man who he meets on the bus
Right.
at
Oh
the
yeah, that
beginning,
guy's
who's the
hysterical.
artist,
Right.
that is hysterical.
Yeah.
When you learn that, like, he starts mooching off of his parents and then decides to become a communist.
Yes. Exactly. Because his parents weren't. What was it? It was because his parents weren't. So he became a communist because his parents weren't giving enough to him or something.
Yeah, like his parents were going to cut him off or something, so he
Yeah.
became a communist.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah.
And the hilarious scene later with the woman who would just does nothing but complain,
Oh, for
and
me,
she
it was about
nags and
the woman
nags.
that nagged about her son.
Ye
That
No,
she
that
kept
wasn't
begging her
funny. That was
son.
sad.
Oh yeah, but
That
it started funny. It started funny until you realize, oh, this is why she's going to hell, or this is why she's staying
so
in hell.
that was the mother, right? The mother
Yeah,
whose
she tried to
son
convince
was
her
in.
son to go with her.
It was, if I'm remembering, unless we're thinking of two different things.
Hmm.
So it was that her son was over the mountain,
Right.
and she was talking to her brother, his uncle,
Yes.
and he was trying to convince her to stay. And we don't actually see the conclusion of that story.
We don't.
And I think specifically Lewis mentions that like we don't see the conclusion of it, and he actually asks. I think George MacArthur is his uh, spirit guide in
I
the
think
book.
so.
He
Yeah.
actually asks him like what happens,
Right.
and goes, "Does she have a shot? Can she make it?" And he says, "Yeah, she has a shot."
Yeah. He says
Yeah.
about everyone that has a chance that they don't know the final outcome of. Yeah, they could survive, make it, but they're probably not gonna.
So with her, he specifically doesn't show the end. I think because it's just such a horrible situation.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to think of somebody who went through that not making it, right?
Right.
But at the same time, he makes it plausible that maybe she didn't.
Sure. Well, I mean, and what I love is that it's the idea that something good like love can be perverted by by the damned, that they could even want to drag someone they supposedly love with them into hell. Just
So
incredible.
Mega Buster Shepherd Appendix N made me appreciate Lewis more. I used to think the Christian theming was an outlier. Turns out to be quite the opposite.
I don't know
Narnia was
what
just
appendix.
one amongst many.
I don't know that book. Is that
Christianity
one of Lewis's?
Appendix N.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't know Appendix N.
No, I do not.
Oh, there
Yes.
we
Regale
go.
me.
All right, so we're gonna have to start with Jeffro. Do you
All
know
right.
Jeffro Johnson?
By reputation only.
So Jeffro Johnson was the editor in chief of the Castalia House blog.
Right.
The Castalia House blog had a brief like glory day when Jeffro was the editor,
Okay.
because he brought in a bunch of writers, one of whom was me.
Hmm.
Uh, by the way,
Which
but
was the smartest decision you ever made, obviously.
which is clearly the best. No, actually, it was terrible because I have been really lax in updating it. Uh, actually, I'm going to start doing that again soon. Come to think of it, because
Good.
just
Post up when you read
even
it. Right. I'll read it.
yeah, just even just for Pinkerton's ghosts, I'll tell Ben I'm going to one day. I promise you, I am going to do that article on what's it called? Blam.
Blam.
It was a manga. So there was a thing a while ago where me and Ben promised that we were gonna each read something or watch
Hmm.
something that the other one got us to, and
Oh.
and I promised I was gonna read a manga called Blam, and I crammed, and it's a really long manga,
Hmm.
and I like crammed it in at the last second and skim read half of it, and it was actually, and Ben was actually pretty pissed at me, which which he was right to be because he
Sure.
read my thing. Ben read my thing. So
I'm
I
still
promised
kind
Ben
of
at the
angry about
time.
it.
Yeah. So I promised Ben at the time that I would write a Castalia article about it, but then I think it was actually like relatively soon after that we actually started Pinkerton's Ghosts, and I
Right.
basically stopped, or I very rarely updated the Castalia blog.
Sure.
One day I'll do it, and then I'll just go. Then there you go. Now stop giving me that glare.
That's right.
I wrote the article.
See,
See,
that's why he
I
got
did
you in
pay
the ear of the
attention
ghost,
to it.
so you can forever and always hold this over your head.
No, to be fair here, actually Ben has like said nothing but it's bothered me. It's me being bothered myself by it more than Ben,
Sure.
because he was not wrong to be mad, because he read my thing and I'm like, so dude, I read it, but I like skim read it, and he's like, I'm actually pretty pissed about this,
I can appreciate
and
that.
I'm like,
I've had.
I'm like sorry about that. I'll write. Okay. I'm like, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll write a Castalia article about it, and then I
But see, Pinkerton
Pinkerton's Ghost
should make
kind of
more to make up for it.
started, and then
Oh, Ben, your
yes, it
pettiness knows
does.
no
That's
bounds.
what's gonna happen. So I'll just read Bradford Walker's explanation of Appendix N.
Oh,
So
please
who
do.
Jeffro Johnson is? He was invited by first who Jeffro Johnson is. He was invited by Vox to basically be the head of the Castalia House blog. gave it kind of a mini Glory Days moment where I was one of the writers. Josh Young was also one of the writers.
Josh is great.
Yeah, technically we both still are. Anyway, there was Nathan, who now I believe runs the Revolution blog. Misha Burnett, I think, was writing for a bit on there. Daddy Warpig had an article once a week,
Ooh,
and for a while, like it got really popular. So Jeffro, to read Bradford Walker, he wrote a book about Appendix N. Appendix
mhm.
N refers to an appendix in the original Dungeon Master's Guide for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
It's a list of all the fiction Gary Gygax cited as core inspirational material to Grok
Right.
D&D.
Right.
Jeffro wrote a book about the books of that list and how
Ooh.
it was the sci-fi fantasy canon prior to a deliberate move to memory hole it all circa 1980. The
Okay.
investigation and publication is what spawned both the pulp rev movement in indie lit and the old school renaissance in tabletop RPGs.
Okay.
And Bradford also said I wrote a guest post for the Castalia House blog. Yeah,
Oh.
fun fact, believe it or not, unless something happened that I missed, and I don't think so, to this day, I have the most commented upon Castalia House post on the entire website
Congratulations.
because I poked a bear. Pulp
Oh,
Rev
that's
was
always a decision.
so. Yes, it was a bad decision. So at the time, there was sort of semi not really rivalry between the Pulp Revolution and the Superversives,
Okay.
and I think other people actually thought it was more serious than I did because I didn't really think that was basic. I wrote an article that was pulp fiction as we're understanding it doesn't really exist,
Sure.
and uh, there there are things in the article that now that I look back on that I do stand honest about it. So yeah, it's fine.
Mhm.
And I got hundreds of comments, and they were angry comments too. People were so mad at me.
I love the things people get mad about.
Like and we're talking people who are on our side.
Right.
I pissed people off, man. Like that offended people.
I'm so proud of you.
And to this day, so Daddy Warpig had a post that was very near that might have more views for all I know, but doesn't have more comments. That's the only one that's even close to mine, where he said that his post was hard science fiction does not exist,
Hmm.
and he wrote it before me, and I was actually piggybacking off of him when
Hmm.
I wrote mine because I said that I don't agree with that, and I still don't.
Sure.
That hard science fiction doesn't exist. I still don't agree with that position. However, once like mine, don't it's a fine article. It's a good argument. It's worth
Sure.
engaging with, right?
Sure.
Uh, and he got hundreds of comments. And on my article, I said so he wrote that, and it was supposed to be his big controversial statement. And I
Right.
actually wrote on there, but let's be honest. Look at the audience. He knew everybody was going to agree with him.
Right.
Hold on a moment. I'm getting a call. Go
Very
and
good.
entertain the masses.
Ah, this is what I do. For you see, I am an actor. All right, so I can answer questions about Hollywood if any of y'all want some. I had a big audition earlier this week for a YouTube channel that would hopefully provide me with lots of work, but probably won't. And then earlier this week, I sat outside in the hail and rain, which it does occasionally rain here in Los Angeles, as I waited to be coof tested. Yes, every time you work in Hollywood now, you have to have somebody swab your nose. It's an insane situation. And if you're working multiple days on the same shoot, then you will probably have to be coof
Hold on.
tested 5 or 6 times each.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I just got a call to be told that the New Jersey Devils were on.
Oh, that's a
The
hockey
hockey
team,
team.
right? Yes. I enjoy
Yeah,
hockey.
and I said thank you for letting me. Thank you for letting.
Very nice. I was regaling them with minor tales from Hollywood. Are you still
Anyway, it is sad that the Caselli House blog isn't that popular.
there? Sure.
Well, after Jeff. yeah, after Jeffro left, the Castalia House blog kind of I don't know how to put it exactly.
Faded
I
into
guess
obscurity.
it didn't fade completely. It still updates, still gets some comments,
Right.
still people do use it. It's just, I think it's more that the writers stopped doing it after Jeffro was there to kind of keep everybody on track.
Mm.
After he left,
Mm-hmm.
then people just kind of lost interest in writing for it, which is what happened with me partially. I bet you though that if we started getting people to write for it again frequently, it would rise back up in popularity because it had a very good roster.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, though, Vox Day has seemed to realize that his Arcaven blog is probably more. You'll notice that on his website, he talks about his Arcaven blog more.
I'm not gonna lie, I have not been reading Arcaven at all lately. Like,
The Dark Herald, he's the guy who he talks about. The Dark Herald writes articles for Arcaven, and they're pretty good.
mm-hmm.
I may actually write something based on that for about WandaVision
Okay.
on for Tuesday, because between Vox Day mentioned that he disagreed with the Dark Herald's take on WandaVision, and the
Yeah, he
Dark
said he
Herald
really
said
liked
it.
it.
Yeah, Dark Herald said it was mediocre.
Mhm. I get that.
And
I never watched it.
oh,
I've
by the
been
way,
done with the MCU since Endgame. Sorry, go
that's
ahead.
perfectly fair, and you probably made the right choice. But so between Vox Day and the Dark Herald, I don't
Mhm.
fully agree with either of them, but I agree more with the Dark Herald than with Vox. I
Okay.
think. Uh, the reason being that I think that the show was actually pretty good up until the final episode, and the final episode is kind of an evil Pandora's box. The more I think about it, the worse it gets.
Okay. I like
it
the
it's a
possibilities of that.
so the final episode they just have this one stunning line
Mm-hmm.
where Monica Rambeau, who is the strong black woman who don't need no man, who gets
Of course.
superpowers because random.
Sure.
Uh, she literally could have been taken out of the story completely, and it would have changed nothing. She added nothing to the story, and she has a line in the final episode after Wanda frees everybody who she's mind raped and enslaved in the town.
Oh.
She also needs to give up the fake family that she created to do it. So, to be clear here, this is a fake family that she created, and in the process of creating them, she also mind raped and enslaved a town.
Oh, that's
And
horrible.
yes, and Monica Monica Rambeau uh, says to her, "They'll never know how much you sacrificed," and that is just such a stunning line to me. I'm like, are are you kidding me right now? You realize that Wanda was torturing these people so that she could play pretend family.
Right.
Like,
Wait.
what are you talking about?
So, am I supposed to feel sorry for this mind rapist? I'm confused because obviously I haven't
Yeah,
watched it.
that's the problem too. It's really unclear. Now, you could say that, oh, that's a hallmark of good writing. You're not supposed to feel sympathetic for her, but lines like that suggest we are supposed to feel at least partially sympathetic. But the thing is,
Okay.
like, the people who wanted to kill Wanda are clearly in the right,
Sure.
and the people, honestly, taking down Wanda needs to be priorities 1 through 10 on the government watchdog lists.
Hmm.
Just very weird show. But we
Huh.
talked all about it last week, so I won't go into
Okay.
the whole
Sure.
thing now.
Then no worries.
So Megabuster Shepard writes, "Remember that stupid war over the definition of science fiction we had? Much jimmies were wrestled. Yes, it was quite dumb. In retrospect, uh, who cares? And I take full responsibility here. I was part of this and regret it. Uh, although on the other hand, I did get views. How much do I credit? Got those sweet, sweet views.
Feel that. I feel that so much.
Dark
It's all about
Herald and
that.
yeah,
It's all about the validation, my friend.
exactly.
You'd be a great actor. It's all we do.
Bradford
Clout chase.
Walker says Dark Herald and John Delarose write for the Arcaven blog now. Yeah, it looks like they've tried to do for Arcaven what they did for Castalia, which makes sense because Vox is pushing Arcaven now more. So he's trying to develop kind of a super team for the Arcaven blog. I have no idea if it's as successful as Castalia House was back in the day.
Hmm.
the Castalia blog once upon a time was quite decently popular. And
Right.
who knows, maybe if I start writing frequently again, excuse me,
God bless you.
maybe if I start writing frequently again, I can bring back its glory days
What do you mean again? You write
single-handedly.
a 3,000 word story every, oh, what is it? 2 weeks? 3 weeks?
Every 3 weeks. I used to write an article a week for the Castalia House blog.
Oh, gotcha.
And by the way, those articles can take me as short as 10 minutes, so I don't really have an excuse except that I'm lazy. Uh,
Humongous
and
us.
plus, I really enjoy writing them.
Right.
Bradford Walker says, "Oh yeah, you're meant to feel sympathetic towards Wanda despite her doing a face heel turn. This is a series meant to set up Wanda as the villain for the next Doctor Strange film.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, so she's gonna be the villain. So this is almost certainly what will happen. I would actually bet money on this.
Hmm.
She's going to be the quote unquote villain of the film. Halfway through, the larger villain will show up, and Wanda and Doctor Strange will have to team up and take them down.
Ooh, that could be fun.
I mean, I suppose it could be, but I don't know. Wanda really needs to do something to make up for the fact that she
Mind rape the
effective
whole town?
yeah, that she tortured an entire town. Tortured them so brutally that they begged her to let them die.
Oh, wow.
Uh Ben says once every 3 weeks, barely. Shut up, Ben. Uh
I mean, I didn't want to say it, but, the editor can.
Mega Buster Shepherd says science fantasy is a happy medium term. I guess.
I like that. I like that. I mean, that's what Star Wars is, and I enjoy Star Wars. Correction, I enjoy
Uh
pre-Disney Star Wars.
it's more like the more that I've thought about it, the less important it is. I do
Okay.
think it's pretty funny that I have the most commented upon post in Castalia House blog history.
Anthony, did you ever read the Honor Harrington series?
I never have. I've
Okay,
heard it
so
talked about a lot.
sure. I would say the first 3 or 4 books are pretty good in that because it's got some really interesting hard sci-fi ideas. Uh,
Oh, really?
yeah, it's got some of the best actual space combat I've ever seen. Um, he really goes into detail as to the difference between velocity and acceleration and why acceleration is more important in outer space. And he really goes into pretty, I would say the first book is way too much detail, but he scales it back a little bit with his hyperspace kind of ideas as well as his X-ray torpedo ideas. Really fascinating stuff.
Maybe I will check it out one day. I have a backlog, of course,
Oh yeah,
like everybody else.
oh absolutely.
I'm reading Stephen. Have you heard of Stephen Pressfield? It was
I
mentioned
have
in the
not.
Discord the other day, so you might have recognized the name.
Uh,
Okay, he wrote a book called Gates of Fire.
okay,
It was about the Battle of Thermopylae.
right.
I've heard people say that it inspired Frank Miller's 300, though I'm not sure if that's actually true.
I heard
Frank
that it
Miller could have.
was inspired by the movie 300 or oh nuts. There's a movie 300 that 300
The
Spartans.
movie 300 was based. So the movie 300 is based on the Frank Miller graphic novel.
No, but before that, before the graphic novel, there was another older version of the 300 Spartans that I think inspired the light novel that inspired the other movie. I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, either way, Gates of Fire was a novel about it, and it was.
Okay.
And I think that in fact, the 300 movie was originally going to be based on this novel.
Sure, sure.
The novel I'm only partly through, but I can tell you now it has a reputation as a masterpiece, and the reputation is earned. It is a masterpiece. What the book is really good at so far,
Mhm.
relatively early in, is making its hero, not judging its hero. If I want to make,
Mm,
if I'm trying to put it the right way,
sure,
the hero is not is relatively moral by the standards of the ancient world,
sure.
and
I can see
that
that.
is the standard by which he judges and is judged by everyone else.
Okay.
So
And let's
the
assume the
plot,
hero is
the
Leonidas.
here, no, actually, the main character, the premise of the story is that after the Battle of Thermopylae, a
Mhm.
soldier is found alive on the battlefield, a Spartan,
Right.
and he is plucked off of the battlefield by the Persians and saved by the Persian surgeons.
Ooh.
so that he could tell his story to, because King Xerxes wants to know who these Spartans were and how they managed to last so long.
Right.
So he wants him to tell the story, and the main character believes that he has been spared by the god Apollo, who is like his patron,
Hmm.
and who has picked him to tell the story of the Spartans to
Right.
the and and keep their story alive.
Hmm.
So it just goes through his whole backstory, how when he was a child, his city was burnt to the ground, and him and
Hmm.
his cousin and their slave like wandered around looking
Hmm.
for somewhere to live, and he was forced to rob and steal from farmers and people. And one day he's caught,
Hmm.
and he's actually nailed to a board, and this cripples his hands.
Oh.
So he believes that he's never, he can't use his hands proper. He can't like open his fingers fully anymore. So he believes that his life is over because he can never be a warrior and never be a fighter. And that's when he gets his first vision of Apollo, who tells him that he needs to become an archer.
Mm.
And eventually, he finds his way to Sparta,
Hmm.
and he sort of like he sort of works for the Spartans. And you
Yeah.
see how the Spartans train their children. He kind of like I guess he would technically be considered a slave, but
Yeah.
he's there voluntarily because he wanted to join the Spartans. And he fights with them, and of course, eventually, This is the point where I'm at. Him and his best friend, who he was like, basically, he's his best friend. He officially would have been like his slave. He
Yeah.
was there basically as like a training partner for his friend,
Hmm.
and they have snuck off to join a battle that Leonidas is fighting, and
Mm.
that's where I'm at in the story.
Okay. I
It's
remember.
a
So I took
brilliant book. Go
when I was
ahead.
in college, I took a lot of. I kind of minored in history with my double major in political science and communication, and my history professor, brilliant, godly man, he somehow found a way to incorporate. I guess it's because he was tenured. He made it so that every time he covered Roman history, he had at least 2 full days devoted to Christianity and to popular objections to the crucifixion of Christ. It was incredible. Um, and then he would answer uh, uh, why those arguments were false, like the faint theory, and the Jews, the Christians stole the body of Jesus and stuff like that. Absolutely incredible he did that. Anyway, he covered Spartans, and it was oh man, his classes on talking about the Spartans and how cruel they uh, were incredible because I took this class right at the same time that 300 came out, and
Yeah,
this guy was the
300
reason.
is
This guy's the reason my online persona is Pax Romana and has been for the last 3 years.
300 is a fascinating movie, and the reason that it's a fascinating movie to me is that it's so weird. Like everything in 300
Hmm.
kind of happened,
Hmm.
but
Yes.
almost like in a reverse mirror way of how it's portrayed on screen.
Right. For instance,
Like it's so strange. It's a
well,
fascinating movie in that sense.
oh sure, I watched it with some neighbors, my next door neighbors, who over quarantine definitely became best friends of mine. They had never, she had never seen the movie before. He had, and so I spent the entire time saying, "Okay, this is what really happened, and this is why the Spartans absolutely hated this guy who only has one eye, and stuff like that." The narrator actually existed.
Hmm.
It's just the Spartans pretty much ostracized him because he didn't die with everyone else. And then during the next battle the next year, when the Persians came back, he tried to redeem himself, but and he killed a whole bunch of Persians, but because he broke the shield wall formation in order to get his vengeance, he was shunned even further in death by the Spartans because they said, "Hey, he broke the formation. He uh, he sought his own glory rather than the glory of
Oh, that's
Sparta."
fascinating.
Yeah, yeah,
So, in the example that always sticks out to me is the scene where the messenger is thrown into the pit.
yeah. Mhm.
That's actually like a perfect example because that did, in fact, at least as far as Herodotus tells us, I believe this is a Herodotus story,
Yeah,
that
I think so.
actually did happen.
Yeah,
And
and
it
but it also
happened,
happened in Athens.
What was that?
The Athenians did the same thing, though. They killed the messenger also.
But this is the fascinating part of the story. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it happened, and it happens roughly as the movie portrays it,
Mm-hmm.
only the point of the story was almost the opposite of what was actually portrayed in 300.
How do you
Like,
mean?
so what I mean by this is they don't really tell you the full story.
Sure.
After that messenger is killed,
Mm-hmm.
when Leonidas talks to the oracle about it, I believe, if I'm getting my order of events right, and
Right.
he is actually horrified by this because
Mm.
the Spartans have just committed a great evil, a great
Right.
offense.
Right.
They've killed the messenger.
Right.
So Leonidas, in response to this, takes two Spartans and sends them to the Persians,
Mm-hmm.
basically as an offering,
Right.
and says, "We killed your messenger. Here are two Spartans. Do with them as you see fit."
Mm.
And Xerxes is so impressed by this gesture that he sends them back alive and basically says something along the lines of like, that was very admirable of you to do this.
Hmm.
So the killing of the messenger was not like a badass triumphant moment. It was
Right.
actually a shameful moment.
Hmm.
And the thing that was supposed to show the great honor of Sparta
Mm-hmm.
was that they sent two men to Xerxes in exchange for the messenger to make amends for it.
Hmm. I can
And
absolutely see that. That makes sense.
Xerxes himself actually respected the Spartans. He did not look down on the Spartans in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the
Sure.
Persian Empire. So this is going to be the new meme: is Persia did nothing wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, even though, so the Greeks sort of kind of started the Persian War, since it was actually Greek colonies that started messing with the Persians,
Right. In Asia.
and that's right, and that's actually what got them so fed up that they decided to invade Greece.
Right.
Uh, The other thing that's really weird is that occasionally I see in history books people try and spin the Battle of Thermopylae into like a sort of victory for the Greeks, which is really strange. Like they go, "Oh, it bought time or whatever." The Battle of Thermopylae did nothing. It was a catastrophic failure and an utter debacle of a loss.
I mean, it was
In
a really
fact,
good PR event.
it's yeah, the value of Thermopylae was entirely in PR. There are people who say, "Oh, it gave the Athenians time to evacuate the city," which is true, it did, but they probably would have had time anyway,
Sure.
just by virtue of the fact that they knew that Persia was coming. All
Right.
they did was lose an army.
Right. Of three. Well, not 300. Something like 2,000, I think, total.
Yeah. So, and the other fact is that Greece actually had a very good chance of winning that battle, and the fact that the Persians won the battle was actually a great Persian victory.
Right. Yeah. The main reason they won, you know,
They
they
won
won
because
was
they
because of
found
the goat path.
right. They found
Right.
a traitor showed them a path to get behind the army.
Right.
So, like, that was actually a great Persian victory.
Sure.
And yes, the Greeks fought heroically. Yes, they
Right.
lasted for 3 days, but they did it in an easily defensible pass.
Right.
And it was a spot that they had every chance of holding relatively indefinitely.
Sure.
So
Position.
the fact that they lost that battle was actually like a catastrophic defeat for the
Right.
Greeks that
Right.
ended up being turned into a brilliant PR victory. It
Right.
was sort of
That's
like,
awesome.
in a weird way, it's actually kind of analogous to Dunkirk.
Right.
Uh, the only difference in this case is that at the very least we were celebrating something real with Dunkirk, which is that we
Sure.
got people out alive.
Right.
Whereas in the Battle of the 300 Spartans, all that really happened is a bunch of Greeks died.
Right.
But it made for Herodotus was one of the early one of the great storytellers of the ancient world,
Oh, and he was great. He was incredible.
and Herodotus spun this one into a terrific little movie script.
Right.
Some of the great one-liners in all of history.
Yes. Yes.
We'd prefer to fight in the shade is one of
Exactly.
the great lines in all of history.
Absolutely, it is.
Uh,
As is tonight, we will dine in hell.
that as well, the fact that the he has that great scene where he sees the Spartans combing their hair before
Yeah.
the battle,
Yeah, but they
and
did
they
that
go,
in every battle. before every battle. It wasn't.
I
Just,
mean, it made so to be fair, right? Like it actually had a practical reason in that it kept their hair from getting like caught up in their weapons, which was
right,
actually something that was important to consider.
right,
But it also makes for a really dramatic image of everybody being nervous for this battle, and the Spartans are combing their hair.
sure, yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah, Battle of so it's really weird to even see like in history books and things, people try and spin the Battle of Thermopylae into some sort of victory for the Greeks when it was not. The battle that actually turned the war around was the Battle of Salamis, which is a shame
yeah.
because we don't actually know much about it. We have a very vague idea of what happened at the Battle of Salamis, and that was the battle that turned the war around.
Sure. Well, the sea battle also. Well, the sea battle
Yes,
was
that was
100%
Salamis.
yeah, yeah. I know. I was, and it was 100% won the same way that Thermopylae should have been won, because you funnel a massively superior
Yeah,
force
we have a
through the
vague
entire area.
idea of what happened, but I've looked up the battle before, and it's actually it's almost a shame. Like we don't really have that many detailed accounts of the battle, not
Right,
like Thermopylae, which has been recorded in meticulous detail by Herodotus.
right. Which is
Salamis, we just
funny
have a
because
vague idea of what happened.
sure, you have a lot more people that survive Salamis than you did survive Thermopylae.
Right, so that does raise the question of how accurate is Herodotus. But since there's
That's
no other accounts of the battle, yeah,
right.
then that's what we're left with.
Yeah. God bless him. Herodotus had his issues, but boy was he ever interesting.
Herodotus was always entertaining. Gotta give him that.
Absolutely. Which most historians cannot make that claim.
One of the most interesting people from ancient history, or at least relatively ancient, I call it ancient.
Sure.
So, have you ever heard of the Korean admiral?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember his name, but I watched several of the movies. I think it was
Oh,
Red
have you
Cliffs.
really?
Yeah,
Yi
yeah. Red
Sun
Cliffs.
Sin, I think.
A
Yeah,
long time ago, like 6 years ago. I watched these when they first came on Netflix.
this is a guy I wish would be more famous in the West because every time I look him up, he's just a fascinating person.
Yeah.
So, this is I've just looked up the name, and when I looked up Korean admiral, his was the first thing that came up.
Well, there's
So
only one. I mean, only one.
there's
worth
only
noting.
one worth. Yeah.
With all
So
respect to any Korean listeners that we have, et cetera, et cetera.
yep, Yi Sun Sin.
Sure. Okay.
So they said over the course of his career, Admiral Yi fought in at least 23 recorded naval engagements,
Mhm.
all against the Japanese. In most of these battles, he was outnumbered and lacked necessary supplies.
Right.
He did not lose a single battle.
Yeah.
And his most famous victory occurred at the Battle of Myeongyang, where despite being outnumbered 333 to 13,
Mhm.
he managed to disable or destroy 31 Japanese warships without losing a single ship of his own.
Right. Was this
And
when he had the turtle ships, as I recall?
yes,
Yeah, turtle ships were incredible.
and
Besides
his
being
last
very quick.
words. And here's the most amazing part of him. Like
Mm,
this truly is a man who is like he's so unbelievable. It's hard to believe he really exists, but he is
mm,
very, very well accorded. So
mm.
there's no reason to think that he doesn't. And
Sure.
his last words were, "He is wounded in the final battle of the
Mhm,
war with the Japanese." So
mhm,
it's almost just to add to the legend,
mhm.
right? Like he doesn't just die in battle; he dies at the battle that wins the war.
Right.
And his last words are, "The battle is at its height. Beat my war drums. Do not announce my death."
Yes.
Which, what a badass.
I know, right?
uh, there's also what else was it? He kept getting. He was one of those people, and I wonder, in fact, if Yi Sun Sin, if Admiral Yang Guang Li from Legend of the Galactic Heroes was based on him.
I
It's certainly seen. So, you haven't seen Legend of the Galactic Heroes, right?
correct. I'd never even heard of it.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
That's a much watch. That legitimately is like a must watch show. You
Is
really
that an
should see
anime
it.
or what is that?
It's an anime, but
Okay.
it's so the Legend of the Galactic Heroes
Hmm.
you is about in the far future. All of humanity is spread throughout the stars, and there are two major powers. There is, and I'm butchering the names here because it's been a while
Sure.
since I've
Sure.
watched it, but like the Galactic Empire or
Right.
something, and the Three Planets Alliance.
Okay.
Uh, we'll see if Bradford Walker jumps in because I know that he's a huge Legend of the Galactic Heroes fan.
Hmm.
Uh, anyway, he'll correct me where I get details wrong. Legend of the Galactic Heroes is about the rise, essentially, of two men, though it has this massive cast of characters. Yang Wang Li of the Free Planets Alliance
Mhm.
and Reinhard von Lohengram of the Galactic Empire.
A good
And Yang Wen... What was that?
a good Korean name there.
Yeah, right? Well, Young Wen Lee is the one who I think would probably be based on, at least loosely, on Yi Sun Sin.
Sure.
Because his whole thing, it's really like a philosophical thing about the difference between, Reinhard von Lohengram takes down the corrupt monarchy of his country and becomes the ruler, while Yang Wen Lee is a historian and a genius, but he really wants to be a historian. However, he's so good at war that
Mhm.
he's basically keeps being forced to fight, only they force him into the fight, but then he gets very, very popular because he keeps winning battles against
Mhm.
impossible odds,
Mhm.
and the government keeps arresting him and then sending him back out into the battle because they need him.
Yeah,
And
sounds like a light novel title. I wanted to be a historian, but I keep winning wars, so I became a general.
yeah, right. This is actually very, very similar to what happened with Yi Sun Sin. He would
Okay.
win battles, they would arrest him,
Mhm.
and then they would get creamed without him, and they would send him back out.
Hmm.
And he would like turn the entire war around. He has
Hmm.
Yi Sun Sin has another incredible famous quote where he says, "As long as as long as we have a single ship, the Japanese will never despise us." And
Hmm.
what he meant by that is like they will never look down on us. I think
Right. Right.
like as long as I have a single ship, the Japanese will never look down on us.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely
and I'm
an area where modern English has failed because despise used to mean, yeah, look down on, to think little of, whereas now it becomes you just hate the person.
right, exactly. So when he said it, that's what he was referring to.
Right.
Let me see if I can find. I'd like to find the quote 'cause it's such a great quote.
Which, by the way, if any of you guys have listening haven't had the opportunity, I recommend Red Cliffs. I believe it is on Netflix. Let me check this out. It used to be there were two versions of this movie. One was a 4-hour version, just epic film, and the other was a much shorter 2-hour movie. If you get the opportunity, I'd highly recommend the 4-hour version. But
Let
the
me
2
look
hours
up
fine.
Admiral Yi Sun Sin quote.
Yeah, Red Cliff. It is it's released totals over 4 hours in length. Cut outside of Asia, cut down single 148-minute version released in 2009. Director John Woo. Uh,
Oh,
is in charge of
really?
it.
It's a
Yeah,
John Woo movie.
yeah.
Even I know John Woo.
Yeah, right.
Oh, here's one of them. Here's another. Here's a great Admiral Yi Sun Sin quote. They wanted to surrender to the Japanese, and
Mm-hmm.
Yi Sun Sin said, "Your Highness, I still have 12 battleships."
So badass.
What a line!
Oh, it's
So,
incredible. So it
some
reminds
of
me
these
of.
pe- some of these people, I just love reading some of what they say. Just makes me go, "Damn it! I wish I was that cool."
I know, right? Well, there was a. Oh goodness, what is it? There's a really famous Bollywood uh, video called Malhari, which is basically it's a bunch of Indian guys just hanging out and chilling after a big battle, and they're singing, and it's really awesome. Uh, but it is based on an actual uh, Indian general by the name of. Let me see it. Let's see if I can. Let me see how badly I can butcher this. Goodness. Where is it? Where is he? Anyway, it's this general. He won something like 50 battles, never lost a single one. Um, and it's a super awesome dance scene. And he seems a lot like this Korean general. Where is he? I can never remember. Okay, well, looking at this this summary is not going to help that. Indian general undefeated. I'm just going to Google it. He
Okay,
was.
here's the exact quote. By the way,
Mhm,
before the Battle of Myeongyang, that was
mhm,
the one where he took 13 ships, and
mhm.
absolutely creamed a 300 ship Japanese fleet with them.
Right.
And so the king, they said King Songjo sent an edict to Admiral Yi to abandon the warship and take his men to join the ground forces under General Guan Yul. Admiral Yi responded with a letter written, "Your servant still doth have 12 warships under his command, and he is still alive, that the enemy shall never be safe in the West Sea."
Wow.
That's just awesome.
Okay, here's the guy's name. His name was Bajirao Mastani, right? And he supposedly fought 41 battles and never lost a single one. Yeah. I'll send you the link at some point of this incredible dance number. What was great about it was during the 2016 election, somebody superimposed Donald Trump's face onto the picture, onto the face of this dancing Indian general. So you just got Donald Trump doing Bollywood dances, and it's hysterical. It's easily
That
one of
is
the
funny.
funniest things I've ever seen.
That is pretty funny.
Malhari. You know, I show it here on the stream, but I'm pretty sure we'd get flagged and, you know, copyright struck into oblivion. Also, I don't know how to just put it on here.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this battle of Pyongyang, and it's just amazing.
Hmm.
So they said that with only 13 ships remaining from Admiral Wang Yun's disastrous defeat at the Battle of Chilchangriang,
Mhm.
Admiral Yi held the strait as a last stand against the Japanese Navy, who were sailing to support their land army's advance toward the Joseon capital of Hanyang.
Mhm.
The actual numeric strength of the Japanese fleet that Admiral Yi fought is unclear, though he was outnumbered by at least a 10 to 1 ratio. In total, 30 Japanese warships were sunk or crippled during the battle.
Wow.
Todo Takatora, the commander of the Japanese Navy, was wounded during the battle, and half of his subordinate officers were also wounded or killed.
Mhm.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Think about that for a moment. Half of the officers were killed.
And this
Given the
is a
dis-
huge battle too. It's not a small little
no,
skirmish.
Given the disparity in numbers of ships, the naval battle is regarded as one of the most tactically brilliant victories in the history of warfare and a humiliating naval defeat for the Japanese.
Mhm.
Even after the victory, the Joseon Navy was still outnumbered badly,
Right.
so Admiral Yi withdrew to the Yellow Sea to resupply his fleet. However, they did lose the war, which is insane.
Sure. Yeah, Korea has a long history of being Japan's well, whipping boy, unfortunately.
Not Admiral Yi's, though. So
Well,
going back to Legend of the Galactic Heroes,
oh yes, yes.
uh, once Yang Wen Li is probably based loosely, at least, on Yi Sun Sin, and Lowengram is an amalgamation of several people. But if
Mhm.
I had to guess if there was any one person that you would pick him for,
Mhm.
probably Alexander the Great.
Okay.
Uh, but he's a little bit less. I think there's a little bit of less of a one-to-one thing. However, Young Wen Lee, there's definitely like the fact that he keeps being accused of the government of like having revolutionary sentiments when he's the only one that's keeping them alive because he's
Mhm.
so popular. And that he keeps winning impossible battle after impossible battle against overwhelming odds.
Mhm.
So the story is basically a philosophical story about
Sure.
the differences between a democracy and a monarchy and what it means to be a part of one versus the other.
Sure.
Reinhard von Lohengram is, by all accounts, actually a very moral person.
Mhm.
He takes over his country, but he does so after kicking out the corrupt monarchy
Mhm.
that is currently in place. And under his rule, things are quite a lot better. He
Right.
is an honorable person who fights with his men in every battle that he sends them off to. So Bowen Graham puts his skin in the game. He puts his money where his mouth is.
Mhm.
Unlike the previously corrupt monarchy. Yang Wen Li, meanwhile, is fighting to defend a republic that is run by incredibly corrupt people,
Mhm.
all of whom are viciously immoral. Yang Wen Li, if he were to take power and take control in the same way that Lowengram did, probably would win. He might even make the world a better place, but he won't do it because he knows that that would be contrary to the principles of democracy that he believes in.
Okay.
A perfect example of this sort of dichotomy between the two of them, because Young Wen Lee and Lowengram both have great respect for the other.
Hmm.
Young Wen Lee wonders the whole time, and thank you for the link to the video. I'll have to look that
Of
up.
course.
Anyway, anyway, so Young Wen Lee, uh, in a great scene after the Free Planets Alliance has a disastrous campaign in the Empire's territory, and Lowengram is currently a rising star in the Empire
Hmm.
as a general himself.
Hmm.
And Yang Wen Li is looking out for Lowengram. He actually says, "So we're about to have a prisoner exchange, and Yang Wen Li is the only person who has won a battle against him.
Hmm.
Everybody else has lost.
Hmm.
But they are about to have a prisoner exchange." And Yang Wen Li says, "So, just so you know, I am probably what's probably going to happen here, based on what is happening, is that one of the prisoners that they are going to send to us is going to try and instigate a rebellion."
Hmm.
And when he meets with Lowengram's second in command, his best friend Kirchheis,
Hmm.
he says this to him. He basically says casually, "So, you're about to try and start a rebellion here, aren't you?" And Kirchheis is like, "No." And then he gets back and he goes and tells Lowengram, "Oh my god, do you know that he knows what you're gonna do?" And Lowengram like looks at him and goes, "What?" It's like he knows? How could he have possibly figured it out? And Yang Wen Lee's like, "Yeah, I'm just saying that. I'm looking at I was looking at the state of both of our countries and what would make the most sense for you to do, and that would make a lot of sense." And Lowengram is like, "So what did he do about it?" And then he's like, "Nothing." And Longren's like, "Nothing? What do you mean he did nothing?" And Kurte's like, "I don't know, man. He didn't do anything." Like,
It's even more
he says
terrifying.
yeah. But of course, that's because they have completely opposite ideas of what it takes to run a country.
Sure.
From Yang Wen Lee's perspective, he can make his suspicions aware, but if the government decides not to act upon it, he does not have the authority to act on his own.
Right.
Whereas Lowengram would immediately act on his own, whether or not he technically had the authority or not.
Sure.
He would make sure he got the authority. He would be the authority.
Okay. So
It's a
then,
person. It's a perfect example of the difference in their two philosophies.
it's a since it is a philosophical discussion essentially between monarchy and diplomacy. Where do you fall on this issue, then, Anthony? Dun dun
Reinhard von
dun.
That's easy. Reinhard von Lowengram did nothing wrong.
There you go. I like it.
Ben and I say this about once a week. We have a discussion, and it always ends with the phrase, "And also, Reinhard von Lowengram did nothing wrong."
I mean,
Redford
so
Walker,
I
there
was.
we go. I knew he was coming in. Legend of the Galactic Heroes remains the best anime ever produced, and Source light novel series is worth reading.
Hmm.
I wouldn't go that far personally. Legend of the Galactic Heroes can drag a lot in some places, and the
Hmm.
animation quality. It has some beautiful drawings,
Hmm.
but sometimes the animation is not so great, especially in the early episodes. It does get a little bit better as it goes along.
Sure.
And there are parts of the series that drag. I also think that the one Achilles heel of the series, the
Hmm.
only real major flaw, because what I
Hmm.
just discussed were nitpicks,
Right.
the only real major flaw of the series is its handling of religion. It
Hmm.
has the
Well, that's true
typical
for Japanese
Japanese,
in general.
yeah, typical Japanese blind spot when it comes to religion. I think it would
Right.
have been fascinating if Lowengram was like a Charlemagne type of character who
Ooh,
wanted to spread the one true faith,
that'd have been epic.
uh, but was actually like making the world a better place as he did so, as Charlemagne did.
Hmm.
Because normally when you see those types of characters, they're some sort of religious zealot who,
Right.
are tyrannical. It would have
Right.
been great to see a Charlemagne who was conquering the world in the name of true God,
Right.
but was actually improving it as he did so.
Right. Yeah, that'd be pretty
Which
epic.
is, with that said, Lowengram is a great character himself.
Hmm.
So, yeah, the philosophical argument between the two of them is that if Young Wen Lee were to do what Lowengram did,
Hmm.
he probably would be unbeatable, and he would also probably save the. He would be probably be able to save the Free Planets Alliance in a sense.
Right.
But as Yang Wen Lee would point out himself, what he would be saving would not be the Free Planets Alliance, but rather he would be establishing a monarchy himself,
Gotcha.
creating a completely different type of government.
Right.
Yang Wen Lee is a defender of democracy.
Right.
Lowengram takes out roots out the corruption, and the wars he fights are probably definitionally just wars, because he is liberating the people from what is a tyrannical government.
Hmm.
But from Yang Wen Lee's perspective, he himself does not have the authority to reform that government on his own. It has to be an organic movement of the people.
Hmm.
Whereas
That's
Lowengram is
interesting.
the one who is willing to. Lowengram himself is willing to drive that movement in his country.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem with democracies. They
There's
always
also
try to find power.
the other side to this is you could argue maybe that it's a just war, but it's also not that clear because the Free
Mhm.
Planets Alliance is very large and he's fighting the entire thing. Not
Right.
everybody there is suffering.
Right.
And he's the one who's starting the war. He's attacking them, not the other way around.
Sure.
With that said, Galactic Kaiserdom, as Mega Buster Shepard says. Uh, yeah, the Terra Cult is cringe, as Bradford Walker says. Yes, it is. Stop looking at my notes. Uh, Bradford Walker, you and I have similar ideas on what makes that series so brilliant. The Young Wen Lee and Lowengram only actually meet in person once in the entire series, and the meeting lasts about 5 minutes.
Hmm.
But it is characteristically a great scene. I'm going to have a major spoiler right now.
Sure.
But you know what? The show is how old? So, oh well.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So, sorry, Brad, but Wilhelm was a Chad. Anyway, uh, so in this scene, they just have a battle, the Battle of Vermilion. This is the
Hmm.
battle that finally decides the fate of the Free Planets Alliance.
Hmm.
So Yang Wen Lee, who has just been basically in a military tribunal because they're worried that he's becoming too popular.
Sure.
Like I mentioned, he's just been released because Lowengram has been absolutely wrecking the Free Planets Alliance without him. And Yang Wen Lee comes up with a plan. He says, "Here's my plan. Lowengram, as of right now, has no heir. And he knows that Lowengram always takes part in his battles, as a
Hmm.
matter of honor, right?
Sure.
He's not gonna let his men fight in a war that he himself won't take part in. So he says, what I'm
Sure.
going to do is I'm going to keep doing hit and run tactics until I bait him into a final one-on-one battle, and then our goal is to destroy the flagship and kill Lowengram.
Hmm.
And he does this, and he actually gets his battle. And it's one of the best episodes in the series, which it should be,
Hmm.
right, considering the stakes,
Sure.
called the Battle of Vermilion. And it's this brilliant tactical battle. Yang Wen Lee eventually manages to turn the tables on the battle with some sort of trick that his second in command, Julian, comes up with,
Hmm.
who's also happens to be his adopted son. Uh, and they have this epic battle, and finally what happens is Lowengram's secretary, who he
Hmm.
eventually marries, uh, is watching all of this go down and realizes that Lowengram is going to lose,
Hmm.
and she also realizes that Lowengram is not going to flee because
Hmm.
all of his men want Lowengram to flee the battle, and he
Sure.
refuses.
Sure. They love him so
So
much.
she leaves. So she leaves on her own and finds one of Lowengram's other generals
Hmm.
and says, "We need to do something right now. What you're going to do is you are going to attack. I need you to attack the Free Planets Alliance capital city right now." And Bradford Walker says, "This moment, man, that is exactly the sort of moment that gets historians to argue for generations afterwards. Brilliant meta commentary on the writer's part." Yes, he's right, and I'll
Hmm.
explain why in a moment. So she tells him, what you're going to do is you're going to attack the city, and you are going to force them to surrender as quickly as you can. And
Hmm.
they do. And During the battle, young Wen Li actually has his guns trained on Lowengram's ship.
Mm-hmm.
Lowengram's men have surrounded him and are prepared to force him to evacuate when young Wen Li gets word from the Free
Mm-hmm.
Planets Alliance. They just surrendered. The war is over. Stand down.
Hmm.
And he does.
Hmm.
And they said that
Hmm.
later, both young Wen Li and Lowengram considered themselves the losers of the battle.
Hmm.
Because
Wow.
Lowengram did not order the attack on the capital. His secretary told his subordinates to do it against his wishes.
Hmm.
Lowengram wanted to beat young Wen Li in one-on-one combat,
Right.
but she realized that it wasn't going to happen.
Okay, I'm gonna add this to my Crunchyroll list. This
It's a
sounds interesting.
brilliant, and that's when they have their meeting after young Wen Li and Lowengram meet for the first time after this battle. And
Legend.
Lowengram says to young Wen Li, I want you, he goes, why don't you join my team?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, become the ambassador for the Free Planet, the Surrender to Free Planets Alliance to the
Mm-hmm.
Empire. Go, if you do that, it'll probably get a bunch of people on our side. You'll be helping to keep the peace, and you
Mm-hmm.
did lose the battle.
Right.
And Yang Wen Li turns him, or, you did lose the war. And Yang Wen Li turns around and says, I have nothing but respect for you, but I'm going to have to turn down your offer. It's
Hmm.
like this. You and I have grown up drinking different water, and I can never drink from the water that you're offering me.
Hmm.
And he goes, so what are you going to do? And Yang Wen Li looks at him and goes, I'm going to get married and retire.
Oh wow.
And that's kind of what he does, but then more happens after that. Of course,
Sure,
it's
sure.
a long show, but
Well, yeah.
uh,
It actually's not that long. I'm looking at it. It's only got 2 seasons.
over a
Unless
hundred
they're.
episodes though.
Oh, okay. So maybe there are more.
It was OVAs, so it's not really seasons per se. They
Oh,
divide
okay.
it that way, but it
Gotcha.
was really a series of OVAs.
Gotcha.
Uh, Such a great series. Ends on a perfectly ambiguous note at the end of it too.
Fantastic.
Though relatively optimistic, though like almost every major character dies.
Ah,
Uh,
love when that happens.
almost every, not every. There's like one that survives.
Hmm. Well, like I said, I'll give it a watch because this you have piqued my curiosity.
It's a long watch, I warn you. It's
That's fine.
going to take a long time.
Well, I mean, well, I won't say I watched, but I got really far into Black Clover, which is something like 150 episodes currently. So if I can do that, I can probably do this. Which, by the way, you need to watch
Yeah,
it
well, that's true.
But why?
because it's interesting. It's
Is
basically
that
a
Ben?
better version of My Hero Academia.
Is that Ben?
It is Ben.
Did he just get on specifically to ask why I should watch Black Clover?
I'm sure he did. And then he'll never return. You should watch Black Clover because, okay, the animation is occasionally spotty. It's one of those that's never taken a break, kind of like,
I don't
One
know.
Piece
Maybe I'll
was.
just read the manga then, because like the One Piece anime, I just don't think is very good, but the
But
manga is brilliant.
it's much better than One Piece, in my opinion. No offense to any of you listening to like One Piece, whatever. Um, but it's got that formula, that same formula of My Hero Academia, where you've got a hero who has absolutely no powers, but through will and determination, he winds up getting his own. Um, but for Midoriya, he kind of just gets it because he impresses a hero, and he kind of right place, right time. For our hero, he still like he does not have any powers this entire time. He is special because in this entire world where everyone has a quirk, he doesn't, and he never does, essentially. And it's the fact that he doesn't have a quirk that makes him unique and special. And it's an interesting feat. Um, he spent all this time building up his body, whereas everyone else builds up their mind. Uh, and it just shows that, hey, you may have a dream,
That
but you work with what you've got.
I
And
mean, I'm sure it's
oh sure, the fights are also a lot better because in my My Hero Academia, the fights boil down to who can punch the hardest. Yeah, there are some differences, but more or less, your fights with Midoriya, who has the most will to overcome. The fights with one All Might, it's how hard
well.
can you hit, that kind of thing.
My
But
Hero Academia sort of takes shonen fight philosophy and
mhm,
boils it down to its absolute essentials.
Yeah,
Like the All Might versus it's essentially a battle of philosophies in My Hero Academia that they
sure,
sort of because I think the fight scenes in My Hero Academia, especially All Might versus All for One, is one of the great anime moments of the past decade.
absolutely.
I think, and I think I don't know if anybody would even disagree with that. To be honest with you,
And I
it's
would disagree with them
very
if they did
it's
disagree with you.
and it truly is one of the great anime moments. With that said, you're absolutely correct that it boils down to one final punch.
Yeah.
I have, however, always said that the United States of Smash scene of My Hero Academia, to me, is the peak of what I want my writing to be
Oh,
because I want to
dude.
write a line that absurd. I want to write a line that absurdly corny that's also that genuinely emotional at the same time.
I cheered when he said that. I was sitting in because I
Uh,
watch my anime on my bathroom floor because my back hurts, so I've got to rest it on a tile floor every night. Uh, and I let out a huge cheer when that happened at like 11 o'clock at night, waking
so
up my neighbors.
me and my siblings, we would watch like it was on TV, and we were watching that episode. And we were just discussing the episode as it was playing,
Right,
complimenting it
right.
as it was going. Kind of like this moment's great, this moment's great. And
Hmm.
every time that scene is on, like when they get to that moment,
Hmm.
we all just stop talking.
Mm.
When they go, and now that power belongs to you, Toshinori. When he rises the hand back, they zoom in on his face, and the explosion goes off. You just
Yes.
shut up because
Oh
it's
man.
such a great moment. You're just
Yes.
taking it in, and when it ends too, you have that moment of chills where you're just like, "Whoa, what did I just watch?"
Mm. It was so incredible.
Great. That's what great fiction writing does. By the way, I do this once again. This is running gags in uh, the superversive live stream universe that you miss by not being part of the show.
You
Uh,
don't routinely invite me. I don't want to force myself where I'm not
Ben,
invited.
you're basically always Ben. Wow,
Whatever, my
Ken.
David.
Yeah, right. You're basically always invited. I
Oh,
say.
fair enough.
I mean, Ben can clarify, I'm sure, but pretty much, if you want to come on, we're not gonna say no
Fair
unless
enough.
we have unless we've invited like I don't know Adam Baldwin onto the show. In which
Dude,
case, sorry, you're out.
no. I'm
Sorry.
coming on for that show. I got questions.
Ken,
Never
based
mind.
on the
You're
power of
what?
friendship, of course you're invited. You were never not invited. Pump up that music.
Exactly.
Don't you know that with all the fights we've been through and all the scripts that we've written, we've got a bond deeper than friendship. You are my writers. Da 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 da.
Nani?
Nani?
I wish I knew more Japanese so that I could actually level
That's really
hilarious
all you have to
anime.
say.
It's true.
Nani.
And
Nani.
oh goodness, just little words. That's all I know.
Baka.
Baka. Baka.
It's not like I like you or anything.
That's right.
Baka.
Yes, you have to have the slight stutter.
It's not like I like you or anything, but Baka.
There it is. There it is. All right.
Nailed it.
Peak tsundere.
But
What are you
anyway, what
watching
I
these
was
days,
saying with
Andrew?
what am I watching? Good
Yeah,
question.
anime wise.
I'm watching nothing because I use a PS3 to watch Funimation and Crunchyroll, and
Oof.
apparently they just stopped updating the app completely now. Which,
Oh, rip.
gee, I wonder why.
Sure.
So now it just doesn't work anymore. So I was in the
Mm,
middle of like 5 different shows,
right.
and the only one that I'm really able to keep up with is Doctor Stone because it's on Crunchyroll and Funimation's
Sure.
not working.
That's a great show.
And Crunchyroll app works about 50% of the time. It's
Yeah.
great, by the way. I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, sure.
The number of good shows. I'm gonna have to start pirating like a normal person again soon.
uh, I gotta say,
But
my
anyway,
surprise favorite, and I say surprise even though I really loved the first season. My surprise favorite this season is gotta be quintessential quintuplets. It's by no means good writing, but my goodness, it's got the cutest anime girls I've seen in years.
the number of good shows this season is unreal.
It really is. I
Log
agree.
Horizon, Skate Infinity,
Yep.
Doctor Stone,
Hmm. The final
Promise
season of Attack
Neverland,
on
except
Titan.
not really.
Props Neverland
Yeah,
really
which I don't.
disappoints me this season.
Yeah, the Promised Neverland, except not really, because they actually like ruined it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I would say Attack on Titan surprised me. It's the first 4 or 5 episodes this season are really bland and boring, but it really picks up.
so I don't watch Attack on Titan. It's one of
Sure.
those shows that the reason I don't watch it is just because I never. It's not because I'm avoiding it so much as it's just one of those shows I never got into myself.
Sure. Totally understand.
Uh, like I so enough people that I know
Mhm.
say that it's absolutely brilliant that I
Mhm.
believe them.
Mhm.
And like it's one of those things like one day I'll get around to it.
Sure. I
I
totally
wasn't
understand.
that big of I wasn't that big of a fan of the little bits of season 1 I saw. It was
Right.
very capital E, all caps edgy.
Oh yeah, yeah. The
Uh
first season is super edgy. It's awful.
it wasn't like the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was
No, it's not
very
Sword Art
edgy.
Online.
Yeah. So with that said, like enough people have told me, dude, like Attack on Titan actually gets incredible
Yeah.
that I
Mhm.
believe them.
Sure. I'll add my name to that list.
Yeah, so I'm sure, I'll try it again one day. I'll just
Okay.
have to make time for it.
Fair enough.
But as far as My Hero Academia actually starts again next month.
Oh, that's
Anyway,
right. It
this is
does.
the running gag of what I was saying was
Sorry. Keep interrupting.
there's a line in the Endeavor fight. So
Mhm.
in season 4, the season 4 was kind of disappointing, but the final
Yeah.
fight with Endeavor was incredible.
Right.
Legit, like up with probably my second favorite fight in the show,
Mhm.
which is saying a lot
Oh, sure.
considering how many great fights that show has.
Yeah.
Uh,
Great redemption arc.
the Endeavor fight was amazing, but the dub. So I'm actually, unlike a lot of people, I'm very lenient towards anime dubs. I actually generally like them, and the My Hero Academia dub particularly, I think, is actually pretty good.
Mhm.
But the dub just ruins, in my opinion, my favorite moment of the fight.
Mm.
So they have that scene at the end of the fight where they're playing Endeavor's theme, which
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's one of the best songs. Like I can't remember the name of the theme, but he has this dark theme that they play in the background as he
Right.
falls from the sky. With his after his plus ultra prominence burn,
Right.
and he lands on the Nomu with fists in the air, and they have the reporter, and in the subtitles, she has this fantastic line delivery where everybody like pauses for a moment, and then she goes, "Endeavor standing," and they start playing, and then his theme, which had gone quiet, kicks up again
Mm.
as everybody starts celebrating, and I just
Mm.
love that scene. And the
Sure.
dub butchers it.
Mm.
The voice actor is just awful. After he does it, like the voice actor just sounds kind of confused. He just goes and endeavors standing,
Ah,
and I'm
man.
like,
Uh.
man, though, like that moment is supposed, like you're supposed to be looking at that and going, you just watched something that should be impossible.
Right.
Like this is a man that is supposed to be dead.
Right.
That what you just saw couldn't have happened, but
Right.
it did.
Right.
That should be your reaction.
Mm.
And the Japanese voice actor sold it.
Oh,
Like
sure.
I believed her.
Sure. See,
She
that's just
sounded
my
like
opinion of
she
American
really
dubs in
believed it.
general.
I know. I actually tend to be more lenient, though. On the other hand, some of my opinions are kind of weird. Like I know, for example, the Beastars dub
Right.
is actually considered to be one of the better dubs, and I thought it
Mm.
was terrible.
Mm. I haven't seen it.
Like
I haven't watched anything about Beastars.
so, the dub of Netflix's dubs, I think, tend to be considered better than the Funimation dubs,
Right.
presumably because they get more time to do it.
Sure.
This is just to be clear here. I'm not going by what I think. I'm going by reputation.
Sure.
And the Beastars dub was considered to be pretty good,
Mm.
and I thought it was awful. It's one of my least favorite dubs.
Mm.
Uh, there are other dubs I think are actually perfectly fine, but the
Mhm.
Japanese is better, like Somali and the Forest Spirit.
Mhm.
I thought that the dub for Somali and the Forest Spirit was actually quite good, but
Mhm.
the woman who played Somali in the Japanese dub, or I guess dub, yeah, the Japanese dub was so good that I think you just lose too much watching the American version, even though she
Mhm.
doesn't do a bad job.
Mhm.
Same with Doctor Stone. Like Doctor Stone, I actually think the dub of Doctor Stone is fine.
Mm.
Uh, like nobody in it is bad or anything, but the voice of Senku in the sub is
Mhm.
so good But I think you lose too much watching the dub.
Yeah, I love Senku in the sub. He's fantastic in my opinion. Or I'm sorry, the yeah sub. I forgot for a second which version I like.
Funny and crunchy not working must be a day ending in Y.
Yeah, accurate. Man, I
Oh, let
remember
me.
trying to get it to work on my cell phone. It never did.
Oh wow, I missed a whole bunch of comments. Let's go through them. So, Bradford Walker, the original Legend of Galactic Hero series is 110 episodes and several movies and miniseries. The remake is in its second season. Yep, this is true. Believe it or not, the remake of Legend of the Galactic Heroes, I actually like season one,
Mm,
which I watched before I watched the original series. And then I flipped on a random episode of season two, and they showed the new character designs for two of the characters from season one,
mm-hmm.
Ruinthal particularly, and I went, "Oh my god, what is that monstrosity?" So I can't watch season two anymore, which is a shame because I actually didn't, or the remake, I mean, which is a shame because I actually didn't think season season one was that bad. I thought it was perfectly fine,
Hmm.
but season two, I just can't get past their new character design for Ruinthal,
Hmm.
which means
They ruined
nothing.
Ruinthal.
Yeah, right. Which means absolutely nothing to you, but trust
Oh
me, he
sure.
he looked like a random anime boy, and he's like a grown ass man in the original,
Ugh.
and he looked like a teenager. It was
Mm.
really weird. Black Clover is the most aggressive. Oh, the light novel series is 10 books long. Wow, I would have thought it would be longer.
For which?
Whatever. Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Oh okay.
Whatever. Black Clover is the most aggressively okay fantasy shonen I've seen. It's a watchable show, but I'm not the target audience.
Right.
Megabuster Shepherd says I prefer Pokemon. Uh, I like the games. I liked the show when I was young. I learned Nani after one time watching the record Lados War OVA. That word got used so damned often. Uh, I got it from JoJo, obviously.
Of course.
Nani?
JoJo reference. Are you approaching me? Other overused state
Yeah, well,
memes.
PS3 is awesome. Yes, PS3 was pretty good. Mostly the PS3 was good because, well, no, here's the problem with PS3 was that you couldn't play PS2 games on it. However, they also don't update the apps
Mm,
anymore on the PS3, so they basically don't work.
yeah.
Robert Walker says funny and crunchy not working. Must be a day ending in Y. Yes. Megabuster Shepherd also says you guys should watch more shoujo. No.
Not a chip.
Okay, I'm not actively against it, and I do like certain shoujo shows. I mean, you did just say you were a
Such
fan
as.
of quintessential quintuplets.
Oh sure, but that's not shoujo. That's a harem. Big
Ah,
difference.
that's true. Yeah, that's actually shonen.
Yeah.
No, I do like some shoujo. I like
I don't
what do
even
you
know what
call
it
it?
would
Wow,
be.
I just blanked on the name, but it's really, really famous. Vision of Escaflowne,
Oh, I've
which
heard good
is
things about it.
shoujo, even though people don't think of it that way, but it is. Uh,
Mega Buster Shepherd, since you're leaving, have a great night.
yes, you
Malcolm
you
Down.
missed all of this, but if you ever watch the end of the stream, have a good night. Anyway, so I did like Vision of Escaflowne, which is shoujo, and Toradora is a great show.
Oh yeah, okay. I guess it'd be
I
considered
guess
shoujo.
it's shoujo.
I enjoyed that.
It's not as easy to categorize since it was a light novel series, not a
That's
manga.
true. Yeah.
So manga are literally just classified like it's a shonen magazine or a shoujo magazine. Toradora was
Right.
a light novel series. So,
Right.
however, I would consider it shoujo probably.
Sure. Why
But
not?
you know what? Toradora is amazing.
I love that show. I
It's a
don't care how you
great show.
classify it.
The writing, it's just the writing in Toradora is super sharp and on point.
Yep.
It wasn't
I absolutely believe that they were high schoolers, and I absolutely
but it didn't
wasn't
bad
bad.
or
I've
anything.
seen much
It was
worse.
just
Right.
comparatively weak. Yeah, it was just comparatively weak, but I was still entertained when
Right.
I saw it. I've also seen people criticize the ending of Toradora because people are dumb since the ending's great.
He's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Look,
Ignore those people.
Toradora didn't need to do anything complicated to end well.
It,
Yeah,
I mean,
spoil
but I mean, who really cares? But yeah,
of what? How old is Toradora now? It's got to be
exactly.
close
It's
to a
old,
decade now. Wow.
at least. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. And Bradford Walker said that's because anime dubbing is done by a petty, corrupt clique of incompetents with money most of the time. Japanese voice actors are actual trained pros. They act like it, and their business demands it. I
I
guess
mean,
that's true. Like I said, I actually am pretty lenient towards the most dubs. Like I for example, there are certain dubs that people say that they think are terrible that I have always thought were perfectly fine. Like the My Hero Academia dub, for example, I think is very good
Uh,
most of the time.
I
With
just
my
know
one,
too many of the actors personally. It just it. On the one hand, I know I can say, hey, look, I love you guys, you're great, but on the same time, it's like, you're really not good actors.
the Konosuba dub is quite good, even though the Konosuba, although that's another example actually of something where even though I think the dub is good, you lose so much when you miss out
Right.
on the sub that
Yeah.
it might not even be a fair trade.
Sure. Oh, hey, did I ever tell you I met
You met
oh good. Yep.
Kazuma's voice actor, right? You did
Yep.
mention that once.
Well, never mind. There went my bit story.
Go ahead. You can go
Okay,
ahead.
that was
Tell
real.
it.
Oh, it was great. I was on set with him, and it was some worthless job. I was doing it for a friend of a friend. So it was a free job that you know everyone does in Hollywood. Uh, and he was hitting on some girl, and he was trying to play up the big hey. I don't know if you know this, but I do voiceover for a very popular anime, and I
Wow,
could see I could see he was dying
that's
because
sad.
she had that look of a woman who does not care about anime. Even among Hollywood, anime dubbers are considered lowest of the low. And even though he was a
Fantastic.
producer on this job, she did not care. So I walk up and just to rub salt in the wound and make it obvious that he was not going to win, I said, "Oh yeah, I love that. Hey, that was really good. That's one of my favorite anime." Yeah, yeah. And you could just see the disheartened look on his face as she walked away.
Wow,
It was hysterical because
that's fantastic.
he is 100% like short, kind of ugly, little bit pudgy, not like fat, but not defined in any sense of the word.
I get you.
Oh yeah,
That's funny.
it was great.
Um, I re yeah, Konosuba is a fantastic show. Probably my favorite anime comedy. Although the Daily Lives of High School Boys, very close.
I tried watching
Uh,
that one, and it just did not interest me. But I
that's
love
sad.
Konosuba. Yeah.
It's a shame. Reminds me of my friend who I tried to introduce to Konosuba, and it always made me sad because he always said, "I don't get." He got out of it, and he said, "I don't get it. There's no joke. It's not funny." And I
Oh
said, "You
no.
don't get it?" And then I'm like, "I don't know if we can be friends anymore." Sad.
See, I'm
I mean,
showing it to another friend, and
I'm kidding,
he and I are writing a
obviously.
live action Konosuba as a result.
Oh, are you gonna actually try and do that? Because that's a terrible idea. But you know what?
Well,
Good luck.
I mean, it's live action and it's got some of the similar plot points, but we're not going to do like, it's 100% not going to be. Basically, it's a live action in the sense of we don't have the money to do animation, but we're not going to follow the plot in any way, shape, or form. Just the isekai resurrection format in live action.
I get you. I saw the Konosuba movie in
I
theaters.
love that movie. That
Uh,
was great.
it was
Oh
hysterical.
man,
It Scenes in that movie were so funny.
yes. I
They
don't
also had
often
an
laugh out
inter
loud when I watch anime, and this was one of those times.
they had an interview with the voice actors who played Kazuma and
Uh huh.
Megumin before the
Uh
movie.
huh.
Yeah, the Japanese ones,
Right.
by the way. Actually, they would do a
Hmm.
movie or another season or something. And she said, "But I thought that we were done with the character, so when I got the call that they were going to make a movie, I
Aw.
cried." And I'm just like, that's adorable.
Wait, she thought they were done with the characters. So
She didn't
she
think
thinks
there
it
was
was
going
even.
to be any more Konosuba.
Oh, boy, I hope she's even further wrong because I really want to see
Yes.
three of that.
I mean, I've heard the light novel series continues to be good.
Good.
I know
Fantastic.
that, and it ended, but I know that
Right.
the ending of the web novel was actually hilarious, and I don't know if the light novel ending changed it, so I'm gonna spoil it
No, no.
because it's
I don't want to
actually
spoil it.
really funny.
No.
You don't want to
No.
spoil the web novel?
No.
That's lame.
Hey, it's one thing if it's a show that's come out. It's another thing if it's a show that's in the process of coming out.
It is not the light novel though. It's only the web novel.
I don't
The
care.
light novel is what's being adapted.
Doesn't matter. They might still adapt it.
Fine.
uh,
Bradford Walker says the other trash tier status that anime voice actor work has in North America is why that petty corrupt clique can run the scene. Voice actor work in Japan isn't high status, but isn't trash tier either. It helps that a
that's
lot of
true.
Japanese voice actors can also sing, so they can double dip and have multiple choices for
Well,
performing
voice
live.
acting in America
Yes,
is
this is
exceedingly
true.
inbred. you have to know a person to know a person to know a person to even get a chance to work. And I know a person, but I don't know a person that knows a person. And I finally got my voiceover reel finished, and it's getting out there. But I don't really know if I even want to do anime dubs because there is no union benefit.
Oh yeah, they treat
Like
the
I don't get
horrible.
games, but for other things you do. So I don't know. It's not really worth it.
All right, so at the moment it is
Oh
9:05. I
goodness,
think
yep.
we could fairly
I
call
need
it
to eat.
now,
My goodness, I am
right?
starving.
9:05 EST. I should say 9:05
Right.
EST,
I'm in
since
West
we're
Coast time, of
totally
course.
different time zones. And that concludes Anthony's Sunday Superversive live stream. Uh, Tune in next week for I don't know. We'll think of something. It'll be good.
For regularly scheduled bin programming.
Yes, for regularly scheduled Ben programming. And Ken, you're always invited if you want to come on.
I appreciate
Always.
it. It was an awful lot of fun working today. Oh, thank you. There been
And anything you want to say before we end it?
It was a pleasure being on, and I look forward to see you guys again next week.
See you all next week, guys. Also, everybody, pay attention to Pinkerton's Ghost because we are barreling towards our finale at full speed. And guys, we have plans.
It's going to be epic.
It will be.
My.
Have a good one, everybody.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night, yo.
So,